And tonight we are delighted to be joined by Zeina Durra, who is a filmmaker born and raised in London, to a Bosnian Palestinian mother and a Jordanian Lebanese father. She has a BA in Oriental Studies from Oxford University and an MFA from NYU. Tonight we're going to be discussing Luxor, which is Zeina's second feature film, which also premiered at the World Dramatic Competition at Sundance this year. Zeina is now based out of London and is currently developing various new film projects. And also joining us this evening for the conversation is Malu Halasa. Malu is a dear friend of the Arab British Center. She is a Jordanian Filipina American writer and editor based in London. She was born in Oklahoma and was raised in Ohio, and is a graduate of Barnard College and Columbia University, to name a few. I'm sure you've all heard of one of her most famous nonfiction books, Syria Speaks, Arts and Culture from the Frontline, written in 2014. Her latest novel is Mother of All Pigs, my apologies. So please do check these out if you haven't had a chance to do so already. Malu, it's a pleasure to have you with us again. I'm going to give you the floor, and I hope you all enjoy this evening.
Thank you very much, and thanks for everyone for joining us. Zeina, it's really good to see you. I knew Zeina 10 years ago when she was a young filmmaker. I thought Luxor was just a wonderful, wonderful film. It had a very particular mood. And yes, it is a kind of romance, but it's also quite mysterious. And I wanted you to start us off by describing a little bit about the film, but also talking about your inspirations for it. Like, how did that mood come to you?
You're saying that there's a massive police chase that you can hear on the street. So I was quite down about another film that I'd been working on for a while and how it hadn't come together. And I had a dream that night about a woman walking through Luxor, and there was a definite mood. And the next day I spoke to a friend of mine who turned out to be the cinematographer. And I had a long chat with her, and I started unpacking this dream. And I said, you know what? I think I need to make a film, and I think this is it. I think the dream is the film, and I think I need to go out and make it. And she says, well, whatever it is, it sounds amazing. I'll shoot it. And I said, but I'm really thinking about doing like a low budget guerrilla movie out there. Maybe it's just me, you, and who knows, like just really low key. And she says, you know, I'm up for that. And then it just came together really fast because I called Mohammed Hafsi, who's a really great Egyptian producer, just to try and get some background information on how I could shoot there. I wasn't even going to ask him to make it. I just wanted to have a chat with him about it. And he goes, well, it sounds fantastic. I'll make it. And he was also in London for the London Film Festival. So he was literally down the road. It was one of those kind of lots of coincidences. And then everyone, it kind of came together. And really then the next part was, how do I make this image and this feeling into a film? So obviously once you unpack it, you think, okay, well, what does she do? And she in the film, a lot of my sadness about the region and about hope that had been lost, and about you know, also watching friends of mine in their late 30s, early 40s grappling with being women, because it's a time of our life that like no one ever really talks about, and it's such an emotional time for a woman. And you know, I had 2 children by the time I made this film, but a lot of my friends hadn't got round to that yet, and maybe they never wanted them, but they were kind of confronted with this idea of like womanhood, having a child, is this the last time? So I think the film really, with all those kind of things going on in my life and with the people around me, I decided to really explore them in the film. And I thought, there's no better way than really having her go to this place. And why does she go there? She goes there because she has a sense of history with it. Why would she have a sense of history with it? And then I realized, okay, she had a love affair there a long time ago, probably when she was on a year abroad at AUC, you know, and so was the archaeologist. He was there, and then they met there. And it kind of became this really beautiful way of marking where she's gone in her life by looking back, you see. And I think often when we're in this place of trauma, we you know, if we're somewhat like compos mentis, you can really look back and and sort of trace where your life has gone and like what decisions you made or didn't make. And you tend to do that when you're in a point where you're looking back. And for me also, Luxor and the Arab world in general, we're so blessed with these amazing ruins everywhere. You know, you just get in the car and you can drive to a Roman ruin or to like anything. And the fact that you can just have time with these places. So in spite of the chaos of where we're from, you have these moments of silence that I've always been given almost by the architecture and the sense of place, because these old mythic places have such a sense of history and time, and it's almost like you enter a different dimension, and in a way it gives you solace, because you also feel that somehow that history comes in cycles and somehow humanity gets through it and somehow prevails and might even become more enlightened. So you just kind of, it's a real sense of hope. And then the more I researched, so I had this wonderful friend of mine who I'm sure you know, Negar Azimi from Badoon.
Yes.
She introduced me, an Iranian American guy, and she introduced me to Salima Ikram, the renowned
the archaeologist.
Yes, archaeologist, who's this rock and roll archaeologist. And if she had got her hands on me when I was about 13 years old, I would just be an archaeologist. She's like one of those people that infects you with her knowledge. And the more I started researching, and my friend had sort of put me onto this article that she'd written with Salima about this feminist tomb, which is basically these two royal women called Takhat and Bakhatwara had taken over this tomb of this kind of irrelevant pharaoh and defaced it with their pictures everywhere. And she said I thought that's so interesting that you had these royal ladies, we don't know who they are, they're wives, sisters, we don't know, lovers, we don't know what they were, but the interesting part is that they go in and they have the power and sense of self to deface this tomb and make it their own, which is quite a bold act, I would have thought. And so from then I met Salima, and what was interesting about Salima is Salima has a way of transferring knowledge that she makes her subject relevant to everything. So what I like to do when I write, so for example, right now I'm writing a movie about the English countryside. So I've been speaking to, and they're druids in it. I spoke to I don't know what the official title is, but like the chief druid in England. He was fascinating, you know. And then I speak to these people, and then I get there. I ask them questions, and they lead me on to the right place. And so I like to use these experts for my wider themes. So in my film, there was obviously this feeling of like there's a battle between light and dark, right, which is really going on right now, which is also really going on the front lines in many of the places in the Arab world. And what was amazing is when I was speaking to Salima about that, she goes, well, this is very, I said, you know, could you talk to me about their philosophy as ancient Egyptians? Because, well, it's all about dark and light, and how when the sun goes down, it's a battle to get it up again. And if it comes up the next morning, they've won that battle. And there's all this like light and dark mythology. Then there's also birth and rebirth and death. And you know, I remember I was breastfeeding baby Kareem inside Seti I's tomb, because we only had 3 hours to shoot there, so I couldn't breastfeed him. I couldn't nurse him outside. So I was nursing him in the tomb, right by where his sarcophagus would have gone. I suddenly felt really sacrilegious. I was like, oh my God, can I actually be in this tomb feeding this baby? Is this really bad? Like, what am I doing? And it was so funny because Salima goes, oh no, Seti I would have loved that, because it was all about, you would love a baby in his tomb. How you couldn't get more ancient Egyptian dream than that. You know, that's great. You know, that's, so it was funny because, you know, we constantly, that everything that they had to offer philosophically that was on the walls that we showed was very much about her journey and our journey at the moment as a people in this very tricky time in history.
You've answered so many of my other questions, all at once. But really what we should say is that I was interested in the character Hana, your main character, and she's a doctor. And she's come from the Jordanian-Syrian border. She's obviously been in a field hospital. She's very traumatized. What kind of research did you do for her, since you like to talk to experts?
So there was, it's closed now, this in Ramtha, which is on the other side of Durra, on the border, Jordanian border, there was an MSF clinic. And for this other film that didn't get financed, I'd done a bunch of research because one of the characters was a surgeon, but she was basically one of the cousins that goes back for this funeral. So it was a completely different story. And they had taken me up there, and I had spoken to the doctors, who one was from India, one was from somewhere in the Midwest, or he was South, yeah. And I was talking to them and the nurses, and I just realized after speaking to them that they were all coming from some place of trauma themselves. So someone's father had died, another person had just gone through a divorce. And I feel like when you put yourself in those situations, I can't say 100% of the time, but sometimes you've come from something within, and you want to be, you don't mind the risk of going there. Obviously all doctors risk their lives, but this is a really heightened risk. You're on the border. They can feel, even though they were staying inside the Jordanian part, you could still, you were right on the border. You could feel the ground trembling every time there was a bombardment. You were dealing with the people coming literally over the border who were really critically ill. I mean, some of the stories they told me, I will spare you, but it was literally, I couldn't sleep for weeks, about children and parents, and just horrific stories that really killed me. And it was funny because the doctors didn't tell me them. The nurses, who are also male, would literally, one of them, he held me back, and he said to me, because you speak Arabic, I'm going to tell you this. And he said to me, he told me all these tragic, like Sophie's Choice stories about women having left their children on the other side because they knew that child, they couldn't carry two children to the clinic, and so they knew they'd have to leave one. And that kind of story that really just doesn't leave you. This story will never leave me. And I really felt that it was very important to have someone who's going through that, because that's really on the front lines of what we're dealing with at the moment. And then, this idea of of just war and tearing things apart and destruction, whether it's, yeah. Oh, I can't hear you, Malu.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Even though you're dealing with people with significant past, or Hana, this doctor, has a significant past. Mm-hmm. In the movie, as viewers, we're not really allowed to know her past. It comes out. We only sort of we can kind of tell that something's wrong and that she's upset and disturbed, but we don't know the details of that past. And I was very curious about the way that you were able to plot that character so that we have a slow reveal towards the end of the film. And we're seeing that she's cracking up, that she's very upset. But I was very interested in that tension between what you've omitted about her and what you're showing, like how you dealt with that as a writer and director.
So for me, I think that when you do like flashbacks and like all that kind of stuff, it just makes it less of a visceral experience, because I want you to be with her in the moment and yes. go through what she's going through. And there were, I planted like little hooks and almost like, hooks throughout the script very deliberately, so that you would be given hints, and whether they were conscious or subconscious, because the beauty of cinema is so much of it is subconscious, because it's a language we've been speaking since birth, and we were taught how to speak it, but we don't know how, you see, like, it's things you place together. And so the way that I placed it together was such that you understood she was going through something, then you find out she's a doctor, then you realize she's met someone she was in love with, so she's single. She's a doctor. She's on the going to the tombs. They're these tiny, adorable Chinese kids who were actually, they live in Luxor, that family. He has a clothing company or something, and a manufacturing clothing company, and he lives in Luxor with his wife and two children. I said to them, why did you choose Luxor? They go, oh, because it's so beautiful here. So it's kind of amazing that, anyway, so this Chinese family and the little two kids, and when she was looking at them, at the children, I didn't want it to be too much, but she knew that she was questioning, she loves kids as a character, but she also knew she was questioning, okay, this is my time. Like, I've seen this guy, this is my time. Am I going to do this? Am I not going to do this? Am I going to go back to a war zone? Am I going to sometimes go back to war zones, or am I just going to give this whole thing up and just do something a bit more chill because I'm clearly under a lot of stress?
But all of that is a discussion, or all of that is what goes through the viewer's mind.
Yes.
But it's not, none of that's spoken.
No, like, because you can't, because that's cinema. That's why I'm not writing a novel and I'm making a film. I'm making a film because with those images, like I showed you, so she meets him, she's like taken aback. It's obviously very good acting. And then you go on to the next thing where you see she's kind of like really joyful in front of him, and then she sort of breaks down, and then she lies on the bed. And this is the thing about cinema. You have her lying on the bed thinking about the whole thing, and then the next shot is her waking up with her shoes on the bed, which the Egyptians were horrified by. And then it's dark outside. So it's like time when she fell asleep. She doesn't know where, she's disoriented. So you've got that feeling as well. She's disoriented because she saw him and the situation and blah, blah. And then you build it slowly like that. And it's so much fun because there was only really her. And then he was kind of the love interest, I guess. He was like the catalyst for a few things. But because it was just how you could really have fun in the simplicity of building up. It's not a simple way of filmmaking, but it was a really interesting way to build up the tension with these little moments that I could really focus on because it was just about her.
How did, I know that you've done an event that the UN put on and the film was shown. How did people who work in the field, how did they react to Hana the doctor?
I didn't hear back, but I've definitely heard since the film, a lot of psychologists have asked me. One was very sweet. She's like, one said to me, "Are you okay?" I'm like, everyone was talking about PTSD and how they wanted to use it as a tool for PTSD, and other doctors. And in Sundance, it was really beautiful. At the screening, don't ask me how, I had like 6 screenings or 5 screenings at Sundance, and at 2 of them, there were doctors who were coming out of, what do they call it? They call it not a conflict zone. They have a special word for it. I'm blanking now, but in the Q&A, this doctor stood up in one of the Q&As and goes, "I've just come from I would call it a conflict zone, but they call it something else, a conflict zone. And I was doing exactly what she's doing. How do you know what I'm going through when you're not a doctor?" And what I thought was really interesting is I tried to explain to him that as a girl who is made up of Bosnian, Palestinian, and Jordanian and Lebanese blood,
yeah,
and having seen so much and being dislocated by being brought up here because of Beirut and seeing the war in Bosnia, and then what happened with all our relatives coming through London and trying to find a way. When you are familiar with that energy, you understand it somehow. And I just was trying to honor that energy, which I've seen around me, either from relatives or my parents sometimes, or that kind of the energy of war, basically, and that's what I was trying to really show in a secondhand way. That means, so she's not in the war, she just is her removed from the war, because that's always how I hope to God have always experienced war. It's always been me in London, but there's someone next to me who's just been bombed and they're hanging out with me having a coffee. That's kind of very Middle Eastern. That's very Arab world. Just yesterday I was buying some biscuits and there was a guy, an Iraqi, with his kids, and I could tell they'd just arrived. So I started talking to him in Arabic and he was really confused. And then he loved it. And then he said to me, "Yeah, I'm here, we're getting our papers." And, it's just this thing that we're always around. If you're Arab, he's like, "Yeah, we left, we're getting our papers here." And then, I'm, and blah, blah, blah. And I just was trying to explain to my kids who were so young, this is part of our identity. This kind of, you're lucky because, I was born and brought up here, so you don't have any problems with papers. But a lot of people from where we're from are constantly have these issues with papers and what passports they have and where they live and where they get new ones. So it's I found that that's how I answered this question, basically.
That's very moving because it's true. By an accident of luck, our fathers came or whatever.
Yeah.
We don't have to, we're not at Croydon. We're not at the Home Office.
No.
No, it's very, very true. Another thing that you were worried about from your interviews when you were talking about the film was that because you were filming Luxor, you were worried about Orientalism. And I was, because there have been many movies about Egypt and about ruins, and they all, they exoticize. So I was curious how, in approaching Luxor, how you were able to diffuse or deflect or upend that kind of gaze. Is it really because it was stories of women, or how were you able to negotiate that?
So number one, it was an issue because Andrea was so blonde, you know? So like, I was like, oh, great. I've got like, because she's a great actress, which is why I chose her. And she comes from a very socially conscious place because she's from up north. And so she, you know, she is very politically aware and very brilliant. So I knew that we weren't going to have that problem with like how to deal with her or her acting. But physically, she is the opposite of me, you know, like I go around like this, and when I'm in the Middle East, okay, they might think like I'm part foreign, or when they hear me speak, then they understand I'm not. But I really thought about it. So number one was the costume. We made sure that nobody was wearing khakis and white shirts or like fantastic like dresses with hats, or the rubbish you see people wearing in these films, which can be great if you're in Death in the Nile, but like nowadays, you know, no, you know. And I wanted to show her as someone who respected, who understood that if she was to not be harassed, like when I'm going to the Bella, when I'm going down to that downtown Amman to the zoo, and I'm like buying stuff like souvenirs for my kids,
Yeah.
I look like I'm wearing a sack. Okay.
Yeah.
And it's the most liberating thing ever. I'm like a big sack and I'm walking around, and it's because I'm basically asking people to understand that I'm invisible. Like, don't look at me, you know? And I do that when I'm in Kathmandu, or if I'm in, you know, India, wherever I am in the world and I'm traveling, even like, you know, a road trip in America. I just want to be left alone so I can experience the place, right? And I think that's kind of what I wanted her to do, that she could hide in her clothes. It also showed that she didn't, on another character level, her wardrobe, which was so interesting, she had it done in Cairo by like a random tailor, but not like a good tailor, like a guy. She didn't really care. She just bought it off the peg, that kind of stuff. That was the first. The second thing was that I was very aware that when we did the shots, obviously it's beautiful and the shots are always going to look the same because there's only so many ways you can it's how the shots are put together. It's what the music was. I didn't have any like, I only had Asmahan's song at the beginning and end, but I really tried to use music instruments from the region, but in a very non-Orientalist way. I really wanted to have you know, we talked about having the adhan a lot, but the problem is the minute you put that into, you know, the call to prayer, like if you put that in, suddenly people start thinking it's Homeland, you know, like Homeland, the TV movie. So unfortunately, they've ruined a lot of the beautiful things about where we're from. So then I'm like, okay, for the sake of the nuance of this movie, I'm going to take that stuff out, and I'm going to have a very psychological soundtrack, which is more about the spiritual than anything else. And I'm not going to have any musical references. That was another helpful thing. And then there's also the fact that like, I'm just obviously, as like, I feel like I'm a pan-Arab essentially, because I was meant to be born in Beirut, then like I wasn't. I was born in London, and I guess. And then my parents are now living in Amman. So for me, whether I'm in Beirut, if I'm in Amman, or I'm in Cairo, or in the old days, Damascus, I just feel at home, you know? I just feel at home wherever I am. If I'm in Tunis, it's just like, it's the Arab world. And I think that that was also the way I see things. It's also my eye, that no one can teach you. It's just that you feel at home somewhere, and so you're not exoticizing it, you know?
No, I kind of felt that. But there are these Middle Eastern tropes in the film. You know, there's the fortune teller, there's a desert, there's, you know, you draw on the common culture.
But you see, the thing is, the fortune teller, that was really interesting. She is just like those like old ladies that you go and visit. And I just wanted her to be like, I feel like whether you're in South America or you're in the Middle East, you can have them. Now, what saved me was that, that we had this, I guess, I don't know how to say this in the most, okay, we were not allowed to shoot a certain scene, okay? Because of specific reasons. And so and that scene was going to be it was going to be like a a much more Sufi, loud, like exorcism, right? And I think that the fact that we weren't allowed to shoot it actually saved the film, because I found something much more quiet and lyrical juxtaposed with the stars, which is like universal. And yes, the desert, but whenever you go on any of these quests, if you've ever done any of these kind of like, you know, whether you're in the, wherever you are in the world, you always end up in these quite amazing geographical places which enhances your understanding of that spiritual quest. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, yeah.
So that's kind of why I had that in there.
Actually, I think that you're right, that if it had been a Sufi exorcism, that it wouldn't have had that contemplative, introspective, that the viewer of the film, or for me, it was a very personal, all of that was very personal, even though it was your story. It really spoke to me. And you were saying that before when we were talking, you were saying that other reactions to the film is that people have said that the film has given them solace.
Yes, that was really important. And I'm so happy that happened because we had to really think about whether we were going to release the film now, because obviously we released it 2 weeks ago and it was the day before lockdown that we were meant to release it. So it was kind of sad because we were meant to be in cinemas everywhere, and it's obviously a very cinematic film. And I just and I realized actually it's almost the perfect time to show it, because there's something quite healing and hopeful about the film. And I thought in that sense it would be a good thing to show it, and that maybe if it just gives someone somewhere some hope and a bit of travel and an ability to kind of maybe start working through what they're feeling, that could be a good thing, which is why we decided to continue.
Well, it does that, but on another level, an entertainment level, it is like the perfect lockdown film, because it allows you to go to
yes, because you
travel to a terrain that you don't know, and that it's intriguing. So it has that side of it. But I was sort of, I guess really what brings me, before I get to, I want to go back to archaeology and then go to another place in the conversation. But it's, so you, even though you consulted with Salima Akram,
mm-hmm.
you put her in the film too. So I was curious about that, like how was she surprised to be asked to be in the film to play an archaeologist?
Well, she's a professor, so she really performs. You know, professors,
yes.
If they're good, they perform and they have to, you know, entreat, you know, get everyone excited. So she's excellent, and she's such a wonderful character. Honestly, like the film would not have been the same without her. And she invigorated everyone with her stories. Like you would just be talking about, I don't know, like a cigarette, and suddenly there's like a massive, you know, ancient Egyptian story about it that's done really subtly. And it's just this amazing way so I thought it was wonderful to have her around. And she helped me. Like I wrote the stuff, but then I would say, hey, listen, I've written this. Does this sound legit? Like what would you talk about if you, because there were some scenes I didn't put in the film where they're talking about stuff after the dig and what they do. And I was like, is this legit? Like, does this sound like this is how archaeologists would talk? And she's like, well, I take out this word and I would use this word. And you know, she helped me make it like, I like that. I like it when experts help me get the dialogue right, you know, because I'm not an archaeologist, so how am I supposed to know? And then, you know, she was wonderful in the ideas of, like, you know, in that bit where they're talking about Freud, and then she shows her the little amulet of Isis feeding baby Horus, and that's like the kind of precursor for the, you know, Mary and Jesus and baby Jesus, and you know, it's just sort of all these little details that she would say were just so perfect and made the script, it took it to a different level, really. And I couldn't have done that without her. She also opened up her old dig for us, you know, like she had closed the dig a few months before and she opened it up and then got her workers in our art department. Like she has these like workers that help on the tomb, and she got those guys to like put it all together with my art department. So it was really funny to watch us recreating like a dusty tomb after it had just been like cleaned, you know.
No, it sounds like it was fun, but it took 18 days, I read, to
no time at all, because
a very fast shoot.
Yeah. you know, we didn't have any money and to make it, because we wanted to make it small and so that no one could interfere. And I told Mo that was like the kind of ethos behind the film. So he
But
was like,
was when you referred to it earlier, you said it was guerrilla filmmaking.
yeah.
Was that a reaction to this long process, how it usually is to make a feature film?
Yeah, I was so over it.
Years
Yeah.
and
I was so over it because I just wanted to go out and shoot. I just needed to shoot. And so I said, okay, let's just do it like this. Now, it wasn't so guerrilla because it's obviously Egypt and there's a bureaucracy. So they're used to having, like, you know, indie film in New York, you don't have that kind of much of a bureaucracy. In Egypt, it was like, well, the tailor has to have 5 assistants. And then there's the guy that opens the door. And then there's the guy that brings the tea for the tailors, but he can't bring the tea to the actors. It has to be different guys. I'm like, guys, okay, let's rethink this. We can have no tea guys. We can have no 3 tailors and assistants. We have 1 assistant to the costume designer, maybe a tailor if we can get him in here. Maybe we use a local one. It was actually like trying to restructure how the Egyptians think of making a film, because they have very bloated sets, you know, where like literally, and also because the cultural difference is really funny because it was really fun to direct in Arabic. And one thing we noticed was that when I direct in English, I speak, but when I direct in Arabic, everyone was shouting, which was very funny. At one point, I was talking to my AD, and he was saying something. He was screaming something across the set, and then he said it again in English. But when he said it in English, it was really calm. And when he said it in Arabic, he was like screaming. And then I was doing the same thing, and we were like, "What's wrong with us? Why are we so polite in English and just shout when we speak Arabic?" It was really funny. So there was great working there, and they're very technically savvy. It's just culturally we had to kind of like get them on the same page of what really indie filmmaking is, you know. And it was still luxurious for an indie film, you know. We had like a guy placing dolly track, but he was brilliant because it's Egypt. He does it in 10 minutes. In Hollywood it would take 9 hours, you know. So the guy's like a genius. It was a really interesting experience.
Well, it sounds like it was a chaotic experience, and yet the result is this very contemplative, inspirational film. And I'd like to go back to that idea of why people might take solace from it or comfort from it. One of the things that I thought was really interesting is about how important touch was. Like, it seems like Hannah's holding on to things. She's touching the ruins. She's holding on to rocks or amulets. And then even when her and her ex-boyfriend, they've been swimming and they come in to the beautiful Winter Garden Hotel, and she shows them the old phone booths that they would have been calling each other when one of them was around the world, or, you know, one was out of the country, but they were in. And they're old-fashioned phone booths, and they have a swing-in door, and you walk inside, and there's carpet up the walls. Mm. And Hannah's like clawing the carpet, you know, this idea of touch. And I was wondering if this idea of touch it's something that will ground Hannah, but also maybe it's something that we're thinking about now. And I was wondering if that's why I thought Luxor spoke to our times. We're thinking about touch or lack of touch, you know, and these sort of elemental things like scenery, the importance of scenery, nature, the importance of a big sky, the idea that the future is undisclosed, or we read our dreams. Like we're in a time of turmoil. What was it? There's a quote in the film about the old world is dying and the new world is struggling to come into fruition, to be. Yeah. So I was wondering if you could talk about that, or maybe I'm reading too much into it.
No, you're not. You know what's really interesting about the film? I'm someone who's really into the psychology of things as well. That's why I love making films. That's why I write. And I think what happened was that we had like all these amazing ingredients, you know. So I wasn't necessarily myself saying to Andrea, there's a theme of touching in this, but I told her to touch the walls, and I told her to touch the walls of the carpet, and I told her to in the phone booth, and I told her to touch to take the amulet, and I told her to touch the stones. And I think something that Salima told me really, really struck me. And it's also something that the Native American, well, it's really the Native Americans think it. They think that, you know, when you, before you do a sweat lodge in America with the Native Americans, they collect stones, and then they believe that the souls of the stones are what's given to you in the sweat lodge. That's what you need, okay? And the idea that a stone has a soul, I really love that idea. And if you hang out with little kids, they're constantly picking up stones and putting them in their pockets. And they could pick up other things, but they often pick up stones. And I do believe that children have this kind of uncensored capacity to read things and understand what they need. And I felt that way with these stones. Salima also said that these stones, these places, these temples built on stones have been worshipped for so many thousands of years that they can't help be imbued with this sense of, you know, spirituality, energy, whatever you want to call it. If 2,000 people pray in the same place,
definitely. I've been to those temples. I've been to those tombs. I feel that. So I asked you over the phone earlier, do you have an object that you touched or that is from the film, or an object that reminds you of the film, since we're talking about touch?
So I had a lot of crystals with me on the set. We took a lot of crystals, and then we had to, so I don't have anything with me because I pretty much left them all in the tombs. And we left some presents for Sekhmet, some offerings for Sekhmet, who is a fierce but wonderful goddess of war and healing. So she represents war, like, you know, the destruction of war and then the healing. So I think what's really great is when we were there, the whole crew and cast kind of got into the vibe because they could feel this energy, and we once we were about to film in this tomb and in the temple, and I went in and I had a really bad vibe about it because I just felt so unwelcome, and I left. And then Zamir, my DP, had felt unwelcome, so had some other people. So we had a discussion, and then I found out what they used to do, the kind of ceremonies they used to do before they would go into a temple. So we all did those, and then we left offerings. And then the next time we went in there, everything was sunny and like smiling, you know, and it was great. And it wasn't just me who felt this way. It was like, I'm talking about like tech guys, you know, like, you know, people
big burly.
You don't normally talk to them about like leaving a crystal in a tomb for someone. It sounds a bit like they think, oh, you're a bit loopy. But so it was really interesting that it really affected everyone, you know, and everyone was open to it.
So it's just, it's quite, there very interesting mystical aspects of the film, which makes me wonder about your family life. Like, you know, do you come from a family that reads coffee grinds, or?
Of course,
like all of us come from that kind of family,
of course. Right?
So that's what I was like curious, like where that comes from. Like it wasn't just the ruins; it's like in your family.
Yeah, I mean, I come from a
multi-identity family.
What I love about everyone reads coffee cups. It's partly obviously a joke, but partly everyone's kind of always intrigued, you know. And then at the same time, it's there's a situation where, you know, I've been brought up always. I think my grandmother was very aware of these things. My dad's mom, and you know, people that wanted to get, if someone couldn't get pregnant or something, they would go to her and they'd be blessed by her, even though she was married to a politician and whatever. They would come there, they'd go up the hill and they'd go to her house, and she, you know, so there's definitely this element of that. And I definitely, you know, I have done a lot of research and ceremonies and things like that, and I'm really intrigued by it all.
I thought I could tell that by the way the narrative of going to the fortune teller, or going to the woman, this traditional woman or healer, and the way that the future was told. you know, like what happened, the fortune teller goes into her bedroom. We don't even know what happens to her.
Yeah, because
She
half the
goes,
time you
she goes
don't.
to sleep, right?
Sometimes they just fall asleep on you, or they're just like they're tired, or but you know, they do something and then that's it. And it might just be the fact that you're there and it's you made that effort to go, or it could be something psychic. You'll never know, but it's always there's always something cathartic in these meetings, unless they're complete phonies. And then I mean, we went to a really funny one. So my producer didn't know me at all. Well, I mean, he knew me from like,
Wait,
you know,
I should interrupt you, and I should say to the audience, get your questions ready and start sending them in, because we're going to go to a Q&A soon. But please go on with your story.
So we went to this woman called, oh my God, I can't remember her name. It's something like Qurun or Qurun. I can't remember. Some like, she had some really complicated like nickname, like woman of the ram horns or something. And I said to Mo, I was out there on my own location scouting, and I knew Mo from like, you know, Berlin meetings and, you know, maybe a wedding in Cairo or something. I didn't know him as like a mate that I'd go see a fortune teller with. And so he was about to leave the plane. I'm like, listen, I want to go see one of these women. You know, they say that she writes things on a piece of paper and she blesses you and all this kind of stuff. And so we go to her house and she's blind. It was literally out of like a 20th century Egyptian novel. You know, she was blind. She was sitting there in this turquoise room with lots of like prints of hands on the wall, you know, and like lots of writing. And we were talking to her, and Mo basically decided that she wasn't so on it. And I sort of decided, yeah, she's not that on it. It was funny because it's the first person that we'd found there, but she wasn't actually, she was very sweet and she probably could help some people, but she wasn't what I was looking for, you know?
Right.
And then it was interesting because this whole search for who would play this person became much less about how they looked, but about how their energy would seem on film. Like, so the woman we chose, she was about 82. And she's a Sufi, and I just told her to pray and just, you know, burn the incense and pray and then go into the room. And I think just by being around that, we got a much better sense of what was going on than if I'd actually used this woman that all the villagers go to that we thought was a bit of a phony, you know, because then that distracts people because they're saying, they're going to be, oh, is she trying to say that that's phony? Or is that, no, I'm not. I'm just trying to show you that these women can sometimes help you somehow. We don't know how. It's not.
Well, the future is always undisclosed. So, you know, I like the way that Hana saw her own future. You know, that it wasn't anyone else. It came to her. And I think that's what great therapy or great art does. It illuminates that part. Now, because we met, I guess a decade ago. Oh my goodness.
We met about 15 years ago.
15 years ago. Oh my goodness, that's even worse. We met then. I was thinking about your first film, The Imperialists Are Still Alive. And I looked at a trailer and I thought, wow, this film really captures that time somehow. New York, Sylvester singing Mighty Love, the way everyone looked, the clubs. And I thought, well, for you, being a director then must be very different to being a director now. And I wanted you to reflect on that change.
Well, I'm definitely not in nightclubs every night anymore because obviously I'm a mother of 3. So that's
that's progress.
Main differences. But no, on a serious note, my first film means so much to me because it is such an autobiographical, funny account. And I've had emails, literally, I still get emails from people all over the world about how it was so great to see how they live themselves, you know, on film, that no one's ever seen it before. And that's what was so wonderful. It's like I made it for all of us, you know, like all the diaspora or not diaspora, whoever, like I made it for us, and it was really fun. And it's great because I anthropologically captured New York at that time, and that New York is gone. It's completely gone.
And that city is gone. The city is
gone.
It's gone. So,
I know.
Well, you know,
And so
it was move on, just the way it is.
True. And so things moved on, but that was a time, that was a moment in New York's history, and we managed to get it all on film, all the places, all the night, all the places where you shopped, you went, the night, the whole vibe. So I was really happy about that. And then making a film in England is very different because, you know, in America, I went to film school there. I have a big base there. I can call up people. I could do anything. It's easier. When you're in England, it's very limiting in a way because there's like a lot of red tape and they like to put you in a box and you're not properly in that box because you're so English, but then you're like you're a bit foreign, and they get very confused. It's very interesting. So this film was like me going, you know what, I'm just going to go off and make my own film. But it was very different because in New York, I made a film. It was indie, but the budget was a really big budget compared to what I shot Luxor on. And, you know, I had like trucks and, you know, blocking down streets and policemen. And okay, we had a bit of that in Luxor, but I mean, literally it was just like us and a couple of small minivans going around, you know what I mean? And which was beautiful. And we all thoroughly enjoyed it because it meant that we could be really close to the material. And I guess also, the world is a much sadder place, and I think the film has that in it. Like, right when I made that movie, I didn't think the world could get any worse, but now the world is much worse off in those 10 years. And yeah, I think that film is really subconscious. It came from a very subconscious place, and it really deals with my sadness about where the world went from that time. And I guess, you know, it's always very extreme, but from this like fun-loving, you know, girl about town artist to, you know, war doctor, like wondering what she's going to be doing, and I kind of like that because it's like the other side of the coin in a way.
Now we have some questions.
Okay.
So the first one is from Claire Belhassin. I read that Andrea Riseborough came in 3 weeks before. How did you work to get that much weight into her performance in such a short time? And how did you work with her maintaining the energy on the shoot? Love the film. Thank you.
So actually she came out 2 days before we started shooting.
Ooh.
So I had no time with her at all. And it was very much a situation of like, we had one read through. And then we were just on set, and I was telling them, like, you know, I'd say, listen, this scene's about this, and we'd have a little discussion, and then she would just go on and she would do it, and then I would do adjustments, and we would work together like that. It was so gung-ho. But what's great is that we really understood each other when we spoke on the phone, and I'm a really jokey person, so I love the fact that she is too. So we had a really good rapport. And we also laugh at chaos. So it was, I remember on the first day, she said to me, God, this is a bit like 40 Towers. And we just got the giggles because the first day was a bit like 40 Towers because like there's some stuff had gone.
I'm sure the first day on any shoot is like.
We're also in Egypt, you know, and so it was just very funny. So yeah, so and how did I work with her? I very much, the way I like to work is I give them my take. They go and they do it obviously with their take and mine all together, and then they go do it, and then we just do these tiny adjustments. And we and with her it worked because she's a very good actress, you know, and she's open. Some of them are really, really I like to work with actors who are very open to understanding things. And what's interesting is sometimes what I liked about her is even if she didn't agree with something, she would try it out, which is very important, I think, because that's where the trust comes from, you know?
No, definitely.
Try it out with all her heart, not half-heartedly.
Yeah, no, you can tell. Well, I think it's evident in the film that there's a lot of trust, that a performance, a very good performance.
I genuinely do not understand how she prepped for this because I was so worried. She'd had 2 days and she shows up and then she's like the most, but that's basically, she is a phenomenal actress. So, and I don't think many actresses could have pulled off the nuance that she had and the pain she had without it, like, you know, being too self-indulgent and how just getting on your nerves, basically. It was really amazing to work with her.
No, and I also thought the dance in the bar
Okay, so that was really interesting.
That was painful for me to watch at some points, and then it wasn't, and then it was.
Yeah.
And I thought that was the scene of the breakdown. Now there's another couple comments. Let's go to them. From Derek Plumley to everyone. Really impressed, love the film, and love Luxor, the place. Most impressed by Zeina's eloquence. Have to bail out because we have he's going off because he has visitors. But then his question was, if I had a question, it would be, how did you get amateurs from Salima to the Chinese family to the staff at the Winter Palace to perform so naturally?
I'm really into natural performances, and it's funny because some people, one critic said, he said the performance is so natural, I don't even feel like he was like, it's so natural that I got like a bit unnerved, and I felt like, is this a film? You know, it's not film acting. I'm like, isn't that what you're aiming for? Like subtle performance? I was so confused when I heard that. I'm like, who is this guy? And then but I think what's really important is that you give them the confidence, and it's like with your, when you're with your kids, you're just like, yeah, you're doing a really good job, and just try it like this, maybe take a pause. If they can't say a word, just change that word, like don't kill them for the word, and just like, yeah, deal with them with lots of love. I mean, there were times when literally it was so bad, I'd be like, we just have to really be respectful, but then everyone would be almost like, okay, then I'd have to go in and like, assist a bit more, or like that stuff didn't really end up in the film, but I think non-actors sometimes have a gift because they're not jaded by the nerves of wanting this career so badly that they kind of bring too much to the table. They're just some of them can be quite natural.
We have a third question from Ashtar, who's, I'm pretty sure, is a filmmaker. Very interesting discussion. Thank you. What was your eventual budget for the film, and how was it financed?
I can't say how much it was. I don't think I can say how much it was because I don't know if I'm allowed to, but it was basically nothing. And but it was something, but it was not, but I got it financed through the development money was all British, and then the rest was Egyptian, and then a lot of it is a lot of people deferred their salaries for us. A lot of people did this, including myself, as like we all did it as like a film that we really wanted to just make, and that's how we made it for so little, because really it's the salaries that like rack up the budget.
Are you working on, you're writing something now, or are you trying to place a film now? Are you trying to find?
Oh my god, basically all I did for the 8 years in between the two films was write. I have so many screenplays.
That's fantastic.
And I just like don't know which one to go for. So the one I think is going to go next is this English country house drama where like a kind of Middle Eastern couple who are terribly English end up in the countryside.
I remember you telling me about that. You were writing that
when
I saw you in London. You were writing that then. I remember.
I'm rewriting it now, but it's got
that's fantastic.
Because in lockdown we were in the countryside in this house. And I suddenly like came across like the Master of the Hunt and all these characters. I'm like, oh, this is good. I've got to have a hunt in here. So now there's a hunt and saboteurs, and it's quite funny.
No, I'm sure it's going to be very funny.
So that one, and then I have one in Paris that I want to make about what's going on there between it. It's a story where like the society's violence enters this relationship. It's about like a French guy, two French actors. One has Algerian origins and the other is just like a white French girl, and how what happens to their relationship as actors. And then there's a film about parenthood, which is going to be very, very funny.
Well, I know you as a humorous person, and I know you as a humorous filmmaker. Luxor had, it had humor there, but that wasn't the thing that was in your face. But I'm very curious about, in the interviews that I was looking in your interviews before, you were talking about how the political climate might have changed for a director like yourself, with everyone being more interested in diversity, and also from the Me Too movement.
Yeah, so what's really interesting is that you now, obviously it's great for me right now because I've got these great reviews and like it's the best. So I don't want to bring it down, but I think there's still so much work to be done, because it's not that diverse voices are sidelined, it's just that they're invisible.
Yes.
I think that's worse. It's like they all know who the people are, but they just can't factor them into the program.
Yeah.
Not they don't think they're brilliant. They know the good ones are, but it's like, and I think that for me is it's more scary if you're invisible, because you need and I see that with female directors. I see that with directors with ethnicities that they don't, or ethnicity and class that they can't like put together, especially if you're Arab. You're either basically an Arab that's like, the way they see it, I would say, is you're either an Arab who's got, hanging out at Harrods, or you're like the local council estate. You can't really have, it's really interesting. You can't be, or if you were like a poet, Arab, immigrant from an estate, that might not work either. Like they have a specific view of what they want you to be.
Definitely.
And I think I stump them on every level, because I'm so English, but I'm so proud to be Arab. And I think that's what's exciting as well. And that's why I want to make films, because I'm actually showing people a completely new perspective.
Yeah.
Not in an arrogant way. It's just that I'm lucky enough to be here to be able to do it.
No, it's the mixed view, I think, is always, I mean, I'm judging really from the work that I've done.
From our own experiences.
From our own experiences, is that the mixed view is quite complex and it takes in a lot, but it is holistic, because that's the way the world is. It's a mixed world. So for those people that have trouble with that, they'll come along eventually.
And I think in England, the trouble is not malicious. It's unconscious. It's terribly polite and unconscious, which is why it somehow has to be woken up somehow. Whereas in America, they're more conscious of it, but they have a problem they don't know how to deal with. Does that make sense?
There's a discussion that's starting to take place.
Yes, which is really interesting.
And we all know that there is a special relationship between the old world and the new.
Yeah.
And that what the new world is going to do, the old will eventually follow.
Yes.
It's going to take a while, and it's a process. But on that note, I think that we've gone over time.
Oh, really? Sorry, guys.
No, not at all. But I'm just checking with Armani if it's okay that we just talk for a little while longer, or we should stop.
I think maybe we can just give it a couple more minutes, and then I think probably.
Okay, for a couple more minutes. Last question for Zeina is really about, then do you feel optimistic?
I do. I do feel optimistic right now, because even if some of it's lip service and only lip service, at least there's lip service, right?
At least.
Because that's the beginning of the bigger thing. But it doesn't mean that I'm going to be, have an easy ride. It's going to be the same ride, because then you have to explain to them why this is the way it is and why they should trust you to make the film this way and blah, blah, blah. Because film is very visual, obviously. And the way you see things is, and the way you make a film is so indicative of how you see the world. And so if other people are confused by that, they won't understand it on paper, but you have to tell them, no, trust me, because look, I've done, and that's where the idea of trusting the other voice to be able to be true to itself, I think that's the biggest challenge in these kind of situations, if that made any sense.
It does make a lot of sense. We should be true to ourselves and tell the stories that we want to tell. I think that your latest film, and I look forward to the next one, see this journey of telling those stories, and I'm going to enjoy the ride. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Zeina, and thank you, Malu, and thanks to everyone who joined us this evening.